What a day. I mean, in less than 24 hours, we had a U.S. base attacked by Iran, a very confusing ceasefire announced, then pretty quickly violated, and a presidential F-bomb, which I feel like we should probably start there because it actually kind of sets up the chaos that was the last couple days. So this is President Trump just a few hours ago on the White House lawn talking to reporters, clearly expressing his frustration over trying to figure out what's going on between Israel and Iran. Here we go.
That have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Listen, Mr. President, I get it. Been trying to follow what's happening in the last couple days, and that's I think that matches a lot of people's feelings right now. But nonetheless, trying to figure out like where do we start here, and I think the best place to begin is yesterday's Iranian attack against U.S. forces in Qatar. So U.S. Central Command, actually based out of Qatar, published a statement on this yesterday saying, quote, U.S. forces, alongside our Qatari partners, successfully defended against an Iranian ballistic missile attack targeting Qatar's Al Udeid air base near Doha. Thanks to the professional, competent, rapid, and coordinated response of the U.S. and Qatari forces, the ballistic missile attack was defeated by U.S. and Qatari Patriot batteries, and there were no casualties to American or Qatari personnel. They went on to add no significant damage to anything on the base. Again, looks like everything was intercepted. President Trump spoke to that as well, and this is where just the madness of yesterday kind of began. We knew it was coming, by all accounts. There was a warning issued by the State Department for U.S. citizens in Qatar to shelter in place. Hours before the attack took place, Qatar cleared the airspace. The U.S. days ago had moved aircraft off of the airbase, and all of our personnel were in shelters well ahead of time. In fact, Fox News, like 30 minutes before the missiles were even launched, said an attack is imminent. And we know that it was kind of staged and set up as an off-ramp for Iran because President Trump then confirmed it shortly after the attack took place. He posted, quote, Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, and one was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it out of their system, and therefore, hopefully, will be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. So, again, the theater, right? And I believe that when they attacked U.S. bases back in 2020, there was also some advance warning given there as well. It's just strange to watch all this play out. Right now, this clearly upset the Qataris. The Iranians still celebrated it, some as a victory. Now, it didn't fool everyone, right? We've got some videos of Iranians celebrating in the streets. We've got some official statements from the IRGC talking about how this destroyed the American air base and humbled the Americans, and now they know they can't mess with Iran. But again, when President Trump puts out on X and a public medium that Iran warned us before the attack took place, the claims of an overly successful operation is only going to permeate so deep in Iranian society. There's been a lot of issues with the internet there recently, no doubt, but there is still access to the internet. Iran is not completely cut off from the outside world, and no doubt quite a few of their citizens, and you can see them commenting on social media posts, recognizing that this was all just a show. Now, a couple hours after that took place, this is where the madness really began. And this is one of those things where it's better to be able to look back at it a day later or a few hours later than trying to understand as it was going on what was happening. Because at this point, I'm not convinced that the United States, Israel, and Iran were on the same page at all. Maybe now, but up until this point, it's questionable. So President Trump, seemingly out of nowhere, because there were not even rumors of ceasefire talks going on, declared, hey, great job, everyone. We've reached a ceasefire. He said, quote, it has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. And I'm not going to go into the terms of like the times here because it's a mess of like 6 hours and 12 hours, and that's probably some of the confusion. Also, 6 hours and 12 hours from when is also seriously something that needs to be considered. But he said, upon the 24th hour, the official end of the 12-day war will be saluted around the world. So he called, the war is over. Great job, everyone. We did it. You can go home. But here's the problem. it was not clear that Iran or Israel even knew about this, let alone agreed to it. At the very least, President Trump front ran everything here. So right out the gate, we had nothing from the Israeli government, nothing from any official Israeli sources, and the Iranian sources were saying, what are you talking about? There's no ceasefire. We are very much still in the fight. We have no reason to agree to a ceasefire, and we still have attacks planned against Israel. And that was all kind of unofficial statements. In Israel, their spokesperson declined to comment on the ceasefire. So there was a solid 2-hour stretch where I don't think this is a real thing. And I was publicly questioning, did President Trump just make this up and hope that the two sides agreed to it? It was looking more and more like that might have been the case. On top of that, we had the Iranian foreign minister come out and publicly say, as of now, there is no agreement on any ceasefire or cessation of military operations. However, provided that the Israeli regime stops its illegal aggression against our Iranian people no later than 4 a.m. Tehran time, we have no intention to continue our response afterwards. So kind of like a ceasefire not called a ceasefire. If you guys stop, we'll stop kind of thing. So, but nonetheless, the important part there is this is long after President Trump announced the ceasefire was in place, the Iranian foreign minister saying there is nothing in place. Meanwhile, there were massive strikes going on all across Iran last night. By all accounts, it appears to be the most significant bombardment carried out by the Israeli Air Force since this war began. I mean, they were hitting targets left and right, locations all across Tehran shaking for hours on end, which also kind of threw some skepticism on the fact that there was a ceasefire. If there's a ceasefire, is Israel really going to be going this hard? Or then again, maybe they're getting the last punches out before they actually slow it down for a little bit. Then a couple hours later, and I should note that 4 a.m. Tehran time thrown out by the foreign minister doesn't appear to line up with anything that President Trump mentioned. It was pretty clearly before that timeline. And from what I can tell, Israeli strikes were still ongoing after 4 a.m. So that was the third time thrown out in this ceasefire debacle. Anyways, a couple hours later, the foreign minister did apparently confirm that a ceasefire was in place. He said, quote, the military operations of our powerful armed forces to punish Israel continued until the very last minute at 4 a.m. Together with all Iranians, I thank our brave armed forces who remained steady to defend our country until the last drop of blood and who responded to any attack by the enemy until the very last minute. But Iranian attacks continued after that, to include what appear to have been at least one launch after the ceasefire was in place. But before that happened, and after the foreign minister said the ceasefire was in place, we actually did get some confirmation from Israel. They put out a statement saying last night, Prime Minister Netanyahu convened the cabinet to confirm that Israel had achieved all of the objectives of Operation Rising Lion. So again, kind of out of left field. In the span of just a couple hours yesterday, we've got the drastic escalation of Iran attacking U.S. bases, maybe pulling the United States into this conflict. And then all of a sudden, Israel says, well, actually, we accomplished everything and more. Well done, everybody. They say Israel has removed a dual immediate existential threat, both in the nuclear field and the field of ballistic missiles. In addition, the IDF achieved complete air control over the skies of Tehran, inflicted severe damage on the military leadership, and destroyed dozens of central Iranian government targets. Israel thanks President Trump and the United States for their defensive support and participation in eliminating the Iranian nuclear threat. Quick note on that, we actually have some really cool footage of the U.S. B-2 bombers taking off and landing during Operation Midnight Hammer the other day. Some of these pictures are just, you're great, right? Seeing these things in action. Haven't seen any strike footage yet, and we went over some battle damage assessments yesterday, some updated satellite imagery. Nothing really new on that front at all. I'm not even sure. I would think the U.S. probably does have some strike footage, but nothing has made it out publicly quite yet. The Israeli statement continued saying, quote, in light of the achievements of the operation's objectives and in full coordination with President Trump, Israel agreed to the president's proposal for a bilateral ceasefire. This is a tremendous success for the people of Israel and its fighters who removed the two existential threats to our state and ensured the eternity of Israel. Now keep that in mind because we're going to come back to it and kind of the assessment of what all this means. Israel is declaring victory. they have achieved their objectives of eliminating the ballistic missile threat from Iran and the Iranian nuclear weapons program. But a few hours after this ceasefire went into effect, Israel was still hitting targets all across after the ceasefire was announced, before it went into effect, because you've got this window, right, where it's, hey, in 6 or 12 hours, that's when the fighting will stop. Well, in that window, Israel went hard. According to the IDF, they say Israeli Air Force fighter jets struck dozens of military targets in Tehran throughout the night, deploying more than 100 munitions. In the strikes, we once again hit the SPND headquarters building, which is used for the development of technologies and weapon systems for the Iranian regime. Additionally, we inflicted repeated and severe damage to the military manufacturing infrastructure in Tehran. In western Iran this morning, we identified preparations for a missile barrage towards Israeli territory and operated to thwart and disrupt the threat. We struck 8 launchers that were ready for immediate firing. Even at this moment, the Israeli Air Force is maintaining aerial readiness for threat removal and rapid offensive actions. Before the ceasefire came into effect this morning, about 20 missiles were fired from Iran towards various locations across the country, most of which were intercepted, but not all. And it looks like over the course of 6 barrages, at least some of them got through. One appears to have been a direct impact on an apartment building in Beersheba in southern Israel that at this point appears to have killed 4 people and wounded at least 20 more. Now, that strike, again, was in this weird window where the ceasefire had been agreed upon by both parties but had not yet gone into effect. Just think about how tragic that is for any loss of life after an agreement has been reached, but the two sides say, well, we're going to do a few more attacks. Yes, we're going to stop in a few hours. Our objectives have been met. We've done what we've wanted to do. And both sides are saying that. We just got to drop a few more bombs and fire a few more missiles. Imagine think of the tragedy of the people killed in that barrage. Nonetheless, it does look like that was the end of the Iranian launches for the time being. Meanwhile, just to add to the overall confusion here, there were attacks on military bases in Iraq. It looks like right now Balad, Taji, and Victory were all hit with suicide drones. There's still not been any claim of responsibility there. There's rumors that these, if they were suicide drones that were utilized, and really what we're seeing is the aftermath of the attacks. We don't know for sure, and it looks like some radar sites were hit. Radar sites, you kind of look at Israel as maybe wanting to clear a path through Iraq, but Iraq, by all accounts, has just kind of, whether they have allowed or haven't really had any means of defending against the Israeli aircraft flying overhead, that's been the case so far. There are not, from my understanding, U.S. forces based at Balad, Taji, or Victory. So this would not necessarily be Iran going after U.S. service personnel. But right in the middle of all this, some explosions in Iraq. And again, we still don't exactly know what happened there. Shortly thereafter, Israeli Defense Minister Katz reported that Iran had begun the launch of additional ballistic missiles towards Israel in direct violation of the ceasefire. He said, in response to this violation, I have instructed the IDF to carry out powerful strikes against regime targets in the heart of Tehran. And this is when Trump just started to kind of veer, posting left and right, saying things like, do not bomb Iran. If you bomb, it'll be a serious violation of the ceasefire. Bring the pilots back now. And this is about the time where President Trump was answering questions prior to boarding, I think, a helicopter outside of the White House. And he was saying, I'm frustrated with both. They've both been in violation. Both Israel and Iran are not doing what I thought they should do. They're not adhering to the terms of the ceasefire, and clearly frustrated. And that's when we get the presidential F-bomb.
That they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
It looks like during this window that Israel did go ahead with the attack or unattack. Manny Fabian at the Times of Israel reported that the Israeli Air Force carried out a small strike against an Iranian radar north of Tehran a short while ago. The strike comes in response to Iran's launch of 2 ballistic missiles at Israel after the start of the ceasefire this morning. And we have footage and confirmation from inside of Iran that something went boom. So maybe now the ceasefire is back in place? We'll see. It's a lot in a short period of time. So it's worth talking about what all of this means and what to expect going forward. First off, be very cautious as to whether or not this actually holds. My gut says that this ceasefire was somewhat top-down imposed. Based off of how President Trump is responding today and kind of his blow-ups in the media, quite frankly, it seems like he really, really, really wanted this ceasefire to go into effect. I'm not so sure that Iran and Israel have the same zeal of making sure this sticks. We're seeing a lot of posturing between the three parties right now. Again, Israel, as mentioned previously in the video, is saying that, hey, all of our objectives were met. We did everything we wanted to, so that's that. Iran, for their part, is saying that Israel was forced into the deal, that Israel went to the United States and begged for it. The storyline that they're kind of telling across Iranian media is Israel was not able to carry out the scope of the operation that they wanted, so they had to go to the United States and ask the U.S. to bomb the nuclear facilities, at which point the U.S. was on the receiving end of Iranian missiles, and the U.S. and Israel said, enough's enough, guys. We don't want to do this anymore. Let's find a way to stop the fighting. So Iran claiming victory, and we saw the celebrations in the streets from some folks. Israel claiming victory. And then in the United States, the White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, put out a statement yesterday that said, quote, President Trump has accomplished what no other president in history could ever imagine: the obliteration of the Iranian regime's nuclear program and an unprecedented ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Again, the ceasefire, we'll wait to see if this actually sticks. I have a lot of questions about the obliteration of the Iranian nuclear program. I just don't feel like we're there. Again, maybe the assessment is complete and it's not been made public, but it just doesn't seem quite yet like that is actually the case. There's a couple things to point to here. First off, we've got Iranian leadership constantly saying publicly, like, we are going to rebuild the nuclear program. The head of the Iranian Atomic Energy Organization said, quote, we have taken the necessary steps and are now at the stage of assessing the damage of the affected sites. We had a rehabilitation plan prepared in advance and have put together a plan to ensure the continued production in the Iranian nuclear industry and the ongoing provision of services in the field. We also have reports that Iran is planning to, we'll see if this carries out, withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's not clear if they're going to allow IAEA inspectors back in at any point to any of these facilities. And again, a lot of officials in Iran are saying, we are going to rebuild. We're going to continue the nuclear program. On top of that, and kind of flying under the radar right now, is it does still appear that a fair amount of highly enriched uranium is not accounted for. So that 60% that Iran a few days ago said we moved out of these facilities, the IAEA said, yeah, it looks like they moved it out of the facilities. And some anonymous sources from Israel and the United States being reported in recent articles saying we don't exactly know where that stuff is. That seems like a big issue. That's an issue, to be blunt, right? So there's a lot of questions around the nuclear program. My gut says that it's a little premature to say the entire Iranian nuclear program has been obliterated and is can no longer be rebuilt. I feel like that's not quite the case. And to that note, I did want to point you all, for anyone interested in more details on the nuclear program, there was a great podcast put out, I think just came out yesterday or within the last couple days, that I'll link in the description below, from the Iran breakdown. Now, this is put together by FDD, which is a very hawkish organization and wants the complete dismantlement of the Iranian nuclear program. So know what you're getting into when you listen to it. Still, I think in this case, certainly a lot of very, very valuable information. The podcast was titled Assessing the U.S. Strikes on Iranian Nuclear Facilities, and they brought on an expert to talk about the details of what Iran was doing at each one of their facilities. So what was happening at the heavy water plant, what was happening at Natanz, what was happening in Isfahan, what was happening at Fordo, and the differences in each one of those facilities and how their destruction or the damage of those will impact the Iranian program going forward. They broke it down in a way that is way over my head, but I thought it was really, really valuable to kind of hear their take on that. I understand it a little better after hearing their conversation, so that's worth checking out if you're interested in that detail. But for now, ceasefire, maybe, I think, at least as we're recording, it's in place. We'll see if it actually holds. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.